So one of my favorite quotes is by a business author by the name of Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote several business books. You may have heard of them. Good to Great, How the Mighty Fall are just a couple of his titles. But one of my favorite quotes that I've heard him say is, most overnight successes are 20 years in the making. Most overnight successes are 20 years in the making. And that's a significant thing to think about, because I think when people pop up on the scene, especially in the culture and in the times that we're living in, it seems as if they have come out of nowhere. I never heard of this person, and all of a sudden maybe they're trending or they're blowing up, or there's something that cool that they're doing. But in most instances, they have just been out of our sight, and there's been a journey that they have all had and all have been on to get them to that point. I'm thinking about a few examples as I recently watched the Netflix documentary, at least the first series on Kanye West, Genius. And Kanye talks about his journey and how he was creating beats when he was in middle school. And even before then, he was performing in talent shows regularly as a young kid. So Kanye West has been on this journey for decades now. And when he did burst onto the scene, he had all of these things that he had been invested in. I saw a video also of another example I'm thinking of Steph Curry. Steph Curry might be the greatest shooter of all time, basketball player in the National Basketball Association, son of a basketball player as well. But I saw a few videos of Steph Curry shooting three-pointers as a kid, the same way he's shooting them right now from the same distance. And so all of these things he's been doing since he was a little kid. And then one other example I can think of is Sonia Sotomayor. She is the first woman of color, the only Hispanic and Latina that has been appointed a justice for the Supreme Court. Long before Sonia Sotomayor was appointed, as a little kid, she was drawn in by Nancy Drew books. And she was an avid reader, and then she went on to become a debate champion in high school. And so you see this journey and this investment over time, over decades. And so there is no such thing as an overnight success. Are there viral moments? Yes, there are viral moments, but there's no such thing as an overnight success. And I love the way psychologist Angela Duckworth puts it in her book, Grit. She says, basically, there are three phases. There's a discovery phase where you discover, I have this gift or I have this passion, and it bubbles to the surface. But then it has to be followed by a lot of development. And then she says, after the development, there has to be a lifetime of deepening. And so it's this idea of commitment over time that produces that level of success. But I would suggest to both Jim Collins and to Angela Duckworth that there's one little piece in their research and in their writing that they didn't really highlight that I want to highlight for us today. And it's this little piece called faith. It's a little piece called faith. And faith is this belief that we have, absence of evidence, all right, or absence of any guarantee that what we believe or what we see is actually going to happen. And so as we continue this element series, where we've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit, it's outlined in Galatians chapter number 5. We talked about love and joy and peace and patience and kindness. Last week, we talked about goodness. And this week, we want to talk about faithfulness. And so if you have a Bible, we're going to zoom in on 1 Samuel chapter number 17. And we're going to revisit another story about this young man named David. Previously, we discussed David when we examined the fruit of the Spirit, patience. And we talked about how David exhibited patience in his life when he was being pursued by Saul. Saul wanted to kill him, and he was on the run, but he put his trust in God, and he was waiting on God. And so this weekend, I want to pull out probably one of the most popular stories in the Old Testament as it relates to David. This is David's viral moment. People who don't read the Bible, who don't follow Jesus, they know about this reference that we're going to highlight today. So I want you all to follow along with me. We're going to read a little bit more than what I normally like to read, but I want to give you context for this story and what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to jump around just a little bit. So we'll start in verse number 12 in 1 Samuel 17. Here we go. Now David was the son of the Ephraite from Bethlehem of Judah named Jesse. Jesse had 8 sons, and during Saul's reign was already an old man. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war, and their names were Eliab, the firstborn, Abinadab, the next, and Shammah, the third. And David was the youngest. The 3 oldest had followed Saul, but David kept going back and forth from Saul to attend his father's flock in Bethlehem. Every morning and evening for 40 days, this Philistine, this would be Goliath, so that's the reference here to Goliath, came forward and took his stand. One day, Jesse had told his son David, "Take this half bushel of roasted grain along with these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry up to their camp. Also, these 10 portions of cheese to the field commander. Check on their well-being of your brothers and bring a confirmation from them." They were with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. So David got up early in the morning, left the flock to someone to keep it, and loaded up and set out as Jesse had charged him. He arrived at the perimeter of the camp as the army was marching out to its battle formation, shouting their battle cry. So in this first piece right here, Jesse has sent his son David on an Uber Eats run, all right, to his brothers, all right? And once he gets to the scene, then we pick it up right here in verse number 26. Once he arrives, it says, David spoke to the men who were standing with him. "What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Just who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The troops told him about the offer and concluded, "That is what will be done for the man who kills him." David's older brother, Eliab, listened as he spoke to the men and became angry with him. "Why did you come here?" he asked. "Who did you leave those a few sheep with in the wilderness? I know your arrogance and your evil heart. You came down here to battle." So then word gets out to Saul what David is communicating and who he's talking about. So then these last few verses is David's communication to Saul, who is the current king who's in charge. And here's how this conversation goes. David answered Saul, "Your servant has been tending his father's sheep. Whenever a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from the flock, I went after it, struck it down, and rescued the lamb from its mouth. If it reared up against me, I would grab it by its fur, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed lions and bears. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." Then David said, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine." Saul said to David in the JMS version, "All right, dude, go ahead, do your thing." No, he said, "Go, may the Lord be with you, because Saul ultimately did not believe that David was capable of defeating this giant. I just want to tag this message this weekend with just a simple subject as we think about faithfulness. Stay the course. Stay the course. I want to also acknowledge that this is a story about war. This is a story about violence. And I want to acknowledge the fact that this is a tension point for many of us as we read these stories in the Old Testament. But the focus of this message is not about the war. It's not about violence. It's not about the fight itself. It's a focus on David overcoming these seemingly insurmountable, or this insurmountable obstacle that everyone else was afraid of, and why that was the case. And so Saul, the current king, doesn't believe in David, but he tries to help him. He tries to give him his armor. And we all know those people who don't really believe in us. They don't really have our back, but they're going to try to help us, you know? And so Saul is going to try to help him, but David refuses his armor. David goes on in whatever he has, which is just, the Bible says, of five smooth stones and a slingshot, which is what he knows how to use. And he ultimately defeats Goliath. Traditionally, this was a battle strategy where one country or one kingdom would bring their champion and the other kingdom would bring their champion, and the two of them would fight, and whoever won would be the victor. And so this is what we see here. And so this is why that they put Goliath out to challenge whoever Israel had. But here's the thing. David defeats Goliath. And most of us have heard this reference before, and we hear it in sports and we hear it in life. We understand the metaphor around David and Goliath. And so this is David's viral moment. And many of us have the same kind of fantasies about insurmountable odds that we're up against and how we can be David and how we can defeat Goliath. But I want to ask you a question. What about the small things leading up to the big confrontation? What about the little details and the little things that really factor in to what eventually happens? To me, this is why the most important verse that we read in this story is verse number 15, a verse that you would just move right on past and not think much of. But in that verse, it says David went back and forth between Saul's house and his father's house. Now, why is that significant? It's significant because David has already been anointed the next king. He already has a promotion, right? So now David has taken on two jobs that he doesn't have to take on. Like he's moved on. And just so you know, sheep keeping was not that popular of a job. As a matter of fact, it was given to the runt of the family, and nobody wanted that job. It wasn't glorious, and the sheep couldn't protect themselves, and they would wander, and you had to clean up after them, and you couldn't even sleep well at night because you got to make sure that they were taken care of. So David has been upgraded. He's working for Saul, and he's still going back and forth between Saul's house, his new promotion, and his old job, right? So let me put this in just common terms for us right now. So let's just say you've been tapped to be the next CEO of your company, right? But you're still relegated to the mailroom. And oh, by the way, your boss in the mailroom is sending you on food runs for other people on the staff. But you've already been promoted, sort of, to support the current CEO, which is what David is doing. So this is a little bit of a crazy situation, right? This is a lot going on. But David remained faithful. And this tells us a lot about David's character. And I want to know, like, how many of us, given that situation, would do what David is doing? Like, I know in the current culture that we're in, listen, like, We looking for an upgrade before we even deserve an upgrade. Like we dreaming about our promotion, we dreaming about what's next for us, and we halfway faithful to where we are right now because we ain't feeling that anyway, right? I ain't gonna step on your toes too much. I'm gonna keep going. This idea of faithfulness is a Greek word called pistis, all right? And I mentioned this earlier, but it's a deep conviction or a belief specifically in God, all right? So this is what we're highlighting. We're not just highlighting faithfulness, but we're talking about this word pistis, that is a deep conviction in God, all right? So I got 2 points that I want to leave with you that I think help us understand what it means to be faithful and to have this fruit of the Spirit, faithfulness, exemplified in our life. The first point is this, specifically as we look at David's life. Trust God's positioning. Trust God's positioning. When I was recently doing some research, I came across something that I thought was pretty significant. When it comes to the most important thing related to our sense of self, there's one thing that was ranked number one with Gen Z, with the Gen Z generation. There was something, the same thing was ranked tied for second for millennial, and it was fourth for Gen X. And it is personal achievement. Number one, personal achievement. And what that says to us, and we didn't need Barna research to tell us this, but what this says to us is that success is very important to us. This is what we pursue. This is how we rank ourselves. This is how we give value to ourselves. This is how we assign value to others. This is how we measure ourselves against other people. Success. But I think it's important to note, as we're talking about faithfulness, I think it's important to note that if faith or faithfulness is evident in our lives, then our movement and our pursuit is not based on achieving position, rank, or status. Now, I'm not suggesting that pursuing rank or pursuing thing is bad. What I'm saying is faithfulness in terms of a deep conviction and belief in God. We're not solely basing our movements on that. We're not solely trusting on those things and that station of life. Why? Because that can change at any moment. It also doesn't mean that when things happen in our lives that we don't question God or that we don't feel like, God, you messing it up right now. Like, if we're really being honest, we really feel like where God needs help the most is his plans for us. That's what we got. You need you can do a little bit better in that area in terms of kind of the place that you have me in this station of my life. But God blesses David because he consistently stayed in position. And the fruit of the Spirit, faithfulness, can only be reflected if we stay submitted before God. Now listen, when I do weddings, I always have to talk about the word submit. Pre-counseling and during the wedding. Because we don't like to submit. We don't want people to tell us what to do. We want to do our own thing, and we want people to get on page with our thing. I know y'all ain't gonna say amen right there, but I've been married for almost 20 years, so I know that that's true. But I always talk about the importance and the power of submission and mutual submission, and how that plays itself out in our relationships with one another. But it's significant when it comes to faithfulness, and this faithfulness being a fruit of the Spirit that's exemplified in our lives. David, check this out, was submitted to God. He was submitted to Jesse, his father, and he was submitted to Saul. Let's look at the difficulty of this here. God is asking David and calling David in a particular direction. His father still wants him to take care of these sheep that he's gotten an upgrade on. And I don't know about you, but you know, I had one of those parents too. They're like, oh, you're not grown yet. You're still going to take care of this business over here, right? So he's got that going on. And then he is submitted to a leader who has no integrity that is eventually going to try to kill him, all right? He's got all of this dynamic going on. And he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to submit. But he does. And here's the thing. It's his submission and being in that position that led to the viral moment. That's what led to the opportunity to face Goliath, which he wasn't looking for, all right? But it was the position that he put himself in because of the decisions that he made. Y'all know we trying to do this thing backwards. We trying to create viral moments on our own. We're trying to, whatever that means in our life, we're trying to instantly be successful or push towards success very, very quickly. But when we look at the life of David, this is not how it went down, because in this position that David is in, what did he say? He has experience and skill, right? And then he gained confidence in the low place that he was in. The low place was, caring for these sheep, and why he got to be sending food to his brothers? They can take care of themselves, and they don't even like him. They're upset with him. So let me ask you this. What if the position you would rather be in, but you're not in? What if the position that you're in right now is from God? What if that thing that you're trying to get out of, what if that thing that's pressing, what if that situation that's uncomfortable, what if it's from God because he's trying to develop something in you? And how we respond reveals where our faith is. So the first point is trust God's positioning. The second one is trust God's preparation process. So we're in this position. Now trust God's preparation process. Because David stayed in submission, in the position that he was supposed to be in, he was prepared for success. So he has this job nobody likes. It's the runt job of the family, right? It's not sexy. It's not cool. But it was that job. That's the job that helped him. That's the job that helped him grow skills. That's the job that helped him to be successful. That job is what have you ever in your life looked back upon some of the things that you've been through, some of the things that you experienced, and you said, man, I hated that season, but it helped me. I hated the fact that I had to go through that, but it grew me. I hated the fact that I experienced that, but as a result, I have a different skill set now. What did David say to Saul? He said, hey, man, I've been tending my father's sheep. That's what got me ready. Because Saul said, hey, Dave, you're just a kid, bro. You can't go out here against this champion. David was like, yo, you don't know me, bro. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know, how it's been going. These animals that will run up on me, they not here to testify what happened to them. I remember the first time that I was going to play football. And some of you know that I had the opportunity to play a little bit in the NFL, and that's, been one of my just highlight moments of my life. But I remember, it didn't start out that way. The first year I went out to play football, I don't know, I must have been maybe around 7 years old or so. And I lived so close to the park where I first was going to play. I could hear the whistles. I could see the kids walking down the street to practice, and I couldn't wait to get out there. And so I got out there when it started in August, and I remember that I quit after 2 days. And I remember sitting in my room. It's crazy how you have these vivid memories. I remember sitting in my room, and I remember my dad coming in and looking at his watch and saying, you're supposed to be at football practice, right? Why you not at football practice? I'm like, nah, Dad, I'm good. It's too hard. It's too hard. Because here's the thing. I went out there, and they had us, doing all of this stuff. We running, and every time they hit the whistle, you got to slide, and you got to jump up and run, and I'm like, what does this have to do with football? What does this have to do with football? Like, I'm fantasizing about catching passes and, scoring touchdowns. And I'm fantasizing about actually what I see on TV. But I don't have the understanding of what it actually takes to be successful. I don't have an understanding of what it means to have stamina and to have grit and to be tough. And this is what the coaches were doing. They were laying a foundation of toughness. They were laying a foundation of skill building. This is what it takes. And I wasn't prepared for that. So I quit because it wasn't what I had envisioned. But here's the thing. I loved it too much. So the next year came around. I'm like, I got to just suck this thing up and get out there and do my thing. And I did. But how many of us are aborting what God wants to do in us because it's tough, or we don't have a point of reference for what we actually prayed for? God help me, God show me, God lead me. He's like, okay. And you're like, huh? God, trust God's process. So many times we're asking God for opportunities, and he's providing them for us in ways that maybe we didn't anticipate. And so maybe the prayer is, okay, God, if this is for me, and this is how you're leading me, then give me the stamina, give me the strength, help me to persevere, show me, guide me. And what if the job or the task or the responsibilities that you have that, are not that sexy right now is God seeing if you trust him? And what if the season of discomfort right now is God growing this fruit of the Spirit, faithfulness? Luke 16:10 says, whoever can be trusted with a little can be trusted with a lot. And some of us are trying to get a lot, and we're bad stewards over the little. So we got to get that piece right. Let me see if I can land a plane for us like this, and we can get out of here. Faithfulness is not about work ethic. What we're talking about today, this is not about work ethic. Now, I'm not suggesting that is not a part of faithfulness. That is our cultural understanding of faithfulness. But I want to highlight for you that this is not the fruit of the Spirit that God is talking about. That's what our culture idolizes. We're idolizing the grit and the grind and the hours at work and all of these sorts of things. That we are idolizing. No, this is not about work ethic. And yes, we should work hard, but this is not what faithfulness is about. Ultimately, the fruit of the Spirit, faithfulness, is about this deep conviction and trust in God. And because we trust in God, our movements and our commitments are tethered to that conviction only. I think about as we, on the last Sunday of Black History Month, I'm thinking about Harriet Tubman. And I'm thinking about how it was said in Harriet Tubman's story that she herself had escaped, but then went back 12 or 13 times to get others to free them. Now, she's already free. Like, she doesn't have to do this. Like, she's actually putting herself in harm's way to do this. And there was even a bounty on her head, but she had a deep, deep conviction that it was wrong what was happening, and she needed to do something about it. And she was quoted as saying, I said to the Lord, if I'm going to hold steady on to you, I know you will see me through. That's faithfulness. Her faithfulness was in God that he would see her through. So finally, I just want to remind us of Hebrews 11. And you should maybe go back in your leisure and just read through Hebrews 11. It's known as the Hall of Faith, and it's listing all of these people who have done great things in Scripture, names that some of us have heard of before, Noah and Abraham and Moses and Rahab and even David. And it talked about all that they accomplished because of faith. And in the opening chapter of Hebrew, or in the opening verses of Hebrews 11, is Very, very significant. And my dad actually called me a couple of weeks ago and challenged me with one of these verses that I want to leave with you is Hebrews 11:6. It says, now without faith, it is impossible to please God, since the one who draws near to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. What pleases God is not our work ethic. It's not our regular attendance. It's not being a rule follower. It's not that there aren't any benefits to those things. But that's not what pleases God. What pleases God is our trust in him and that he is who he says he is. And because we trust him, we diligently seek after him, which is what we see in David's life. And what does God do? He rewards him. And so God rewards faithfulness, which is diligently seeking him because we trust him. So the question for us this weekend as we close is, how developed is the fruit of the Spirit, faithfulness, in our lives? Are our movements tethered to our trust in God? I don't know why I'm going this way, but I believe this is where you're leading me. I don't know if I should do this or if I feel comfortable, but I trust that this is the place I'm supposed to be in and that this is the right process, even though it doesn't feel good or I don't fully understand it. And so many times we're leaning to our own understanding, which is very, very limited. Our perspective is very, very limited. And so the question is, how developed is this fruit of the Spirit, faithfulness, in our lives? And we can answer that question by looking at how we move and the decisions that we make. And is it based on our trust in God?